Hello, hello, hello. So welcome to those of you who may be joining live in some platform or another, and also as well to anybody who is watching the replay at any point in time. A lot of what I'm wanting to share during this time, oh, thank you. I want to speak specifically to the time and place that we're, I mean, not, place is like planet Earth, but the time that we're living in specifically, which is really around quarantine, shelter in place, some people feeling pretty isolated. And I got a question in the membership that I run called The Collective. It's a global web of women devoted to embodied wholeness. And honestly, one of the things that I've been really grateful for is that about 5 years ago now, I started teaching virtually. And I had the opportunity to do that both sort of solo and teach small groups, and then also to teach a collaborative group and to work with people in an incredibly deep way, but over video conference. And one of the things that this has taught me is about how we can relate to each other via these virtual mediums. So I want to link back to a moment and say that, like I was saying at the beginning, there are these pieces that a lot of them are pieces that I've been teaching for a long time, or that I reference in a lot of different ways over the years, or that come into my work or my programs or my other teachings. And then there's a way that they're particularly applicable now. So I got a question in the collective from one of the women who was saying, it's amazing. Like, there's all these offerings and things are happening, and it kind of feels like my whole life is on screen, and I'm feeling a little overwhelmed by it, and getting drained by sort of like too much, screen time. And how can I relate to this? And I realized, excuse me, that I wanted to actually answer that question to the wider population and not just within the collective. Although often that's something that'll happen, is that one of the members will bring a question and then I'll create a live video that's just for that group. And it's one of the things I really love, because I love that questions then spark something, and then where it can be something that I can speak to, but where we can have a dialogue. And that's one of the things I really love about the collective. But back to the question, I want to say that there are at least two really, they're kind of distinct. They weave together, but there's kind of two distinct pieces to that. And, one, there's a surface level response, which is that it's important for us to create structures and boundaries, self-boundaries, and these kinds of things, so that we're not just glued to the screen all the time. We can be, watching the news, checking the news, reading the news on our screens, on our phones, connecting on Facebook. Now we might have classes on Zoom, but we're also taking yoga class on Zoom, and we're like having our meetup chat with our girlfriends or our friends on Zoom, and we're talking, like I talked to my parents this morning on Zoom. So now kind of like everything is there, right, on some sort of a screen. And so, one piece of that I'm only going to touch on kind of peripherally for today, but it is this piece around really deciding, how do I want my life to go? And in so many ways right now, it can seem as though there are these limitations being placed on us. Well, I can't leave my home, or I can't see my family, or I can't. And there's one way in which that's true. Like, there's a truth that there are certain external limitations. And then there's another way that it's a perfect time to go like, okay, so there's the content of what I want. Like, the content of what I want is that I want to talk to my family, or I want to take this class, or I want to take a class, I want to like do my workout with my physical trainer, or and that's like the content. And then deeper than that, at an energetic level or an experiential level, is what do I want my life to feel like? And that will likely, for all of us, in some way, shape, or form, start to inform the rhythm of now I do this on a screen and now I do this off a screen. And that all of us, for some period of time, have been aware of this need to create rhythm and structure around that. I mean, I'm sure all of you either have at some point or have heard somebody say, like, oh my God, I need to get off my phone. And now we're like, okay, it's not just like the social media or on my phone, it's like everything, right? Like I did a workout on Facebook Live this morning. I've done yoga classes with my teacher on Zoom. I Zoomed with my parents. The woman who asked this question is also specifically taking a class that then has a certain amount of reading, and the reading is online. And so we really have to look at, like, okay, how do I actually want my life to feel? And what's required for that? So I want to touch on that because that is absolutely part of the equation and it's super important. And right now, honestly, we're kind of like just at the beginning here. Some of you have been sheltering in place for longer, some for shorter, but we're kind of at the beginning, and it's, yes, let's hope that we're able to move beyond this. Let's hope things are contained, all of these things. And this is a beautiful moment, actually, in which, rather than like, okay, well, I just have to somehow figure out how to hunker through this, is to actually determine, how do I want my life to go? And let that then be a tool, like the capacity to choose how you want your life to go, regardless of external circumstances. Let that be a tool that then you have access to when quarantine is lifted in your city, or shelter in place is lifted in your city, or however this goes. And so starting now, and that, yes, I want to take this class, but I also want to do this other thing. How do I make sure that I get outside, or I touch the more than human realm, or I talk on the phone rather than on Zoom, or I read a book rather than on a Kindle, or like some of those. And again, it can look like it's at the surface level, but it's a deeper energetic question than that, which is, how do I want my life to feel? So that's piece one. The second piece, though, that I want to speak to is connected to, again, sort of this reality that for most of us, there's going to be a lot of screen time. Those of you who are with me now or watching the replay, like, the irony does not escape me that you are now on a screen talking about screen time. It's so meta. So, and as I go, as always, like I always appreciate your specific shares, like, but what about this? Or how would this apply to my specific life in this specific scenario? How do I work with this? Or yes, this is how I have really succeeded in this way, or this is how I've created what I wanted, or any shares or questions. I just love it. Even if, I need to come back later after I'm done. So the deeper layer I want to point to is, how do we be in relationship on screens? And this is kind of where I got a little like circuitous and jumbled as I first started, but so where I started with I'm so grateful that I started teaching virtually 5 years ago, especially at the depth that I started teaching, because it really showed me in a way that I actually didn't believe it was possible to connect that deeply in a virtual space. I am pretty old school myself. I tend to resist technology. I knew that my boyfriend got me when he gave me a book called The Revenge of Analog. And I was like, he understands me. And he gave me a book, right? So I really didn't believe that was true. And then it was shown to me and I experienced it, right? Rather than kind of being told. So my invitation in a way is to experience this. And even right now, actually. So I would invite you to either close your eyes or turn so that you're listening to me, but not looking at the screen, not sort of focused in this way. We tend to get actually a little bit like a horse with blinders on. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. But that's I mean, humans are biologically designed this way. We have our eyes in the front, and this is the way we orient. And so it's actually important as humans, first of all, to understand that, and then to understand when we have a screen, especially, like, we'll get very kind of myopic, like, to just that space. And to work not against it, but understanding that biology, what do I need to bring to bear? And one of the things that we can do is look away, is be in the space and listen, but not be so intensely focused, especially with our eyes. So this can take practice. A lot of us, for instance, I used to do sessions on the phone. I used to do sessions in person, and then I did sessions on the phone, and then, we got video sessions, and it sort of was like, oh, well, of course I want to see you. And I noticed that sometimes when I'm working with people, I need to close my eyes because it actually allows me to sense something beyond just what I see. So there's a truth to that. We are visual beings, and sometimes we can pick up little visual cues. It's what many people think of when we hear the statistic or the data, and I don't have the number exactly, but there's something to the effect of 75% of all communication is nonverbal. So people think like, oh yeah, that's facial gestures and body movements and these kinds of things, and that's part of it. I actually believe that there's more, like probably the smallest percentage is verbal, and then probably actually the next smallest percentage is like visual cues, and the widest amount of what's communicated is at the more energetic sensory level. And so the practice here is to begin to sensitize ourselves to feel over space and time through the virtual medium. And I believe, so I'm going to go a little bit out there here and hope that I don't lose too many of you, but I believe, first of all, I believe that animals, other animals that are not human, and other beings that are not human, right, the more than human realm, it already still communicates at this level a lot. Not just the sounds that they make, but through this kind of more ethereal realm. And I believe not only do humans have the capacity to do this now, but that we did that a lot before, I hate like to say like olden times, or in more traditional or indigenous cultures, or the way that I think about it actually is in our more land-based iterations of all of us, all of our ancestors. All of our ancestors were more land-based cultures, the more land-based people, because we had to be. And part of what I think that allows for is the sensitizing of our sensory and our energetic space. So I can feel people, I can feel some of you now, some that I know and some that I don't know, even when I can't see, who you are or whether you're watching, but this actual sense of like, okay, I can actually feel other people in this virtual space with me. And to some extent, like even modulating of, am I making sense to them? Am I not making sense? Are they, where are they with me? Are they not with me? And that's like a wide kind of a thing, right? To do this in a public way or with strangers. But something to play with, I would say especially, is, again, first of all, I said at the very beginning, but I talk to my best friend on the phone. We don't talk on Zoom, and I love her to pieces, and I love to see her face, but we just talk on the phone. And it's so, you can do the same thing when you're on the phone, right? I can't see her. A lot of times we're both actually like chopping vegetables or cooking, and we're talking. And it's the content, but there's also just this, there are like these little moments where we like, oh, what just happened there? Or were you thinking about this, right? Where we're actually connected in that way. And so practicing that on the phone, practicing that on Zoom. actually feeling in the video space, whether you're one-on-one, whether it's in a more client circumstance or like a relational with a friend or with family, but really playing with being there with that person, but not getting so focused on like, okay, so now we're talking like this, and I'm going to look you in the eye, and it's going to be like this, but to sometimes look away, sometimes be doing other things, but be feeling that person. And especially if you're watching a Facebook Live, if you're looking at YouTube videos, if you're taking a class online, to really, some of this again is at the surface level. Like I took a workout class today, and I'll look because I want to make sure I actually know what I'm supposed to be doing with my body. And then I'll try not to look at the screen for most of the class. Like I kind of put it somewhere where I can hear as she's going, and I can look at it easily if I'm like, wait, what am I supposed to be doing with that arm or leg or something like that? But then my practice, even a workout practice, right? It actually becomes an internal, like a very personal, embodied, and very obviously physical, but a physical experience that I'm having in space and time, not virtually. So I'm in my living room, I'm having an experience, I'm listening to the birds outside, I'm experiencing the heat of the sun coming in my windows. I can hear my kids, doing their own little things on the couch and at the kitchen table. And actually my awareness is much more in the actual space and time that my physical body resides in. Not really like either on the screen itself, the two-dimensional screen, or even kind of over there in whatever space my workout teacher is in. And so drawing, I guess I would say that there's like two things to that. So one is this kind of sensory. Can we actually feel each other? Can I have a sense of what's going on without it being such a visual thing? And then the other is actually drawing our energy back in. And so one very specific practice that I would give in any kind of virtual medium, whether it's just watching something or whether there's interaction or you're part of a class or whatever it is, but is first actually just start to notice like, oh, where is my energetic body? The kind of like, or where is my attention? Might be one of the ways that some of you can feel it if you're not really in tune with your energetic body. And many of us, especially if it's a screen, and again, some of this is biological, but in front here, like we'll find that we're actually way out here. We're like at the screen or we're beyond the screen. We're almost like projecting ourselves into whatever space we imagine that other person on the other side of the screen is in. And often, there's a couple things that happen. So that's the front. Often there's like nothing going on the back body, but also we're not really aware of bringing our own energetic and sensory self back into our space and time. And one way to do that, so one way is to specifically, especially in the front here, but is to literally intentionally draw it back. Like, what if my energetic body, what if my attention body, what if like my awareness body was brought back to, say, the surface of my skin? And then another way to do that is to directly bring attention to your back body. And it'll you can probably feel a shift in me when I do that. That like it literally changes. I'm still in the exact same spot and I'm still with all of you. But if I very intentionally and consciously bring more awareness to my spine, to my tailbone, to my back body, my energy shifts. And if you try that now, right, even being kind of in this, again, virtual space with me and still listening, maybe even still looking at the screen, but at the same time, without even worrying about like the front energy, trying to draw it back, just like, even just let that be for the moment, but bring as much awareness as you can to your spine, to your back body. And really feel that, and then just notice how that actually draws your energetic self back in. It's almost like it coalesces into your actual physical body, into the space and time in which you exist. And it can help. This kind of weaves a bunch of these pieces together that I've been talking about. But again, especially if you're in a class for a period of time, especially if it's like information, right? Not so much an experiential class, but an information class where it can be really, start to get in that thing like, okay, I'm focused here and I'm listening and I'm taking notes and I'm like in the class and I'm like doing the thing. And is that number one is this back body piece. And then number two is to consistently on a regular basis throughout the time that you're going to be in that space is to reorient yourself back into your own space and time. So if I was taking a class right now, or if I was, in a mastermind with a group or being led in some way and I was focused and I was doing that and I was kind of, in my own experience and taking notes in this, but throughout the thing, staying somewhat connected to whatever class or experience I've chosen to be part of, but taking a moment where I, with my ears, with my listening and with some sort of energetic sense, still staying aware there, but also like, oh, but I exist here. Kendra's body is right here, sitting on this cushion in my office, which is in my house, which is in this small town in Northern California, which is like, and it's just that, I orient myself back to where I actually am physically in space and time. And doing that in some degree mentally, like I said, like I actually can tell myself that where I am, but also really doing that, like looking around. And it's one of the sort of most overlooked, but most useful tools, because we think, we're like, I know where I am because I'm here, but we so often don't. And it's a beautiful capacity that humans have. We can sort of mentally project ourselves all over the place. And that's not a problem in and of itself. Again, it's actually kind of an amazing capacity to be able to like, and now I'm going to be here, and now I'm going to like see this, and now I'm going to play with like this thought, this idea, or like, but we can mentally project ourselves. But most of us haven't practiced doing that consciously so that we are at choice around doing that. And so often, actually, we do need to consciously remind ourselves like, oh no, but I exist right here, right? On this piece of floor, on this piece of earth, in this actual room, my literal physical body exists here. So the other part, and I spoke about this a little bit, but I want to say that I've had two distinct experiences of this recently. And they're a little bit different than what I've said, but one is choosing to take a Kundalini yoga class with my teacher on Zoom. And I wanted to do it for the yoga and for the, to actually, like the actual experience. Like I wanted to do the class, I want to have the breath and the physical experience and all of that. But I did it on purpose because I knew I wanted to be in my teacher's field, like her energetic field. And she is a person who, even though she doesn't have a lot of practice in the virtual realm, she's a person who has a lot of practice in terms of her, of holding the energetic space and like holding with her energetic field. And so she has a capacity to do this virtually, even though she's not that practiced in the virtual realm. And so I knew that I would be in her field. But also some of my capacity to do that comes from my practice and my capacity to feel that I am in her field. So everyone who took that class, I would assert, was in her energetic, heart, being, spirit field, and probably felt it to some degree or another. But I chose, like when I went in, I was like, okay, I like put myself in her field, and I went as much for that as experience as I went for the actual class, like doing the, whatever weird Kundalini, like postures and breathing and things that we were doing. Was like, okay, I want to be held in her field. And I would specifically encourage you to take advantage of that experience, like let that actually nourish you. and tap into that even more than the content of what you're in for. And so her energetic field is wide and strong, but we all have one, whether we've cultivated it or not. So my parents, for instance, they have enormous love for me. And so when we were and for my children. And so when we were on Zoom with them this morning, like, yes, we're exchanging content and information and we're being together and we're kind of relating, and I want to hear about their life and they want to hear about ours. And my kids want to do show and tell with their stuffed animals. But I can also pause sometimes and just breathe and feel myself in the energetic field of that they love us, and feel that at least as much as, getting to see their faces or the content of our conversation. And then I had this also with another teacher of mine who was hosting these really early morning calls of meditation, and his internet is like not fantastic. It's one of those things, like he's one of the most incredible teachers that I know. And like at a technical level, like it's just not fantastic. And it doesn't matter. So there's this sense of like, oh, I can't hear what he's saying, or like I'm not getting the meditation, or his words are disappearing, or it's breaking up. But I could feel like I probably missed, a third to like a half of the actual guidance due to sort of technical blah, blah, blah. And I could get really caught in that. Like I could get caught up kind of in the technicalities or in wanting to somehow make it better, or that I'm missing something or that. And as soon as I started to realize that was happening in that space, I just rested my energy back and I followed whatever I could hear, but I let myself be held in his energetic field, right? In his electromagnetic heart field, in his energy field, in his teaching field, in his awareness field. And we may or may not want to rest into everyone's field at all times, and that's fine. But it's knowing that we have the choice to do that, and that we can actually receive what is available from that person or those people, whether we get the content or not, whether the technology works, whether we can see them, whether we can hear them. And it allows us to kind of disconnect from the screen aspect. And again, in that way, and I talked about this at the beginning too, but in that way, like widen out our sensory self in order to receive what is available from the sensory self of another, even across great time and space, or I guess it's great space distance. That capacity is available to all of us. So you can practice this on screens. I would say in some way with screens probably is one of the more challenging places to practice. But you can practice, some of you are sheltering in place with other humans, like other actual physical bodies, or animals or plants. Or all of us, again, some of you might be in cities and you have neighbors like very close on the other side, or just people walking around outside. There are these opportunities, even inside of really honoring quarantine or honoring shelter in place, that we are afforded opportunities to practice this in a slightly more physical or in-person way. So say you're sharing a house with someone, but they're in the other room. But you can just sit and then just feel, where are they in the other room? And there's our idea, right? Well, I know them and they usually sit in that chair and they're probably on their computer. So there's kind of what you know, and then there's what you can sense. And some of what you sense is like, where is their physical body? And also, where is their energetic body? So you may actually, that might be true. They're sitting in that chair, they're on their computer, but their energetic body actually might be somewhere kind of like either wider than them or a little bit in a different place. You might be able to sense them emotionally. You might start even be able to sense like their breath. or the flow of life in them, right? It's different than specifically their actual heartbeat per se, but that pulse of life in them. And you can feel that. And I would say, there are ways to get weird with this, and I'm not encouraging any of you to invade anybody else's space without their permission, but there are ways to do this that are just sensing. It's just a practice. Like, can I sense them there? Okay, cool. I'm not going to like poke in where I haven't been invited or where I don't have consent, but practicing the more energetic and sensory awareness with other beings. You can do this. Again, I'm going to go a little bit out there, but you can do this with plants. Trees are amazing to do this with because they really have like this energetic field to connect with. And just feel, right, a tree that's outside your house, or you can go near one, but start to feel like, and then how far can you move back and still really feel this tree? And trees do this. My teacher up near Mount Shasta talks about this, that it's at an energetic level, but also the wind that moves through the leaves of the tree, it passes communication. So the air that moves like all the way up from Alaska, and then the wind blows down, and all the trees that are in that line are basically connected to each other. And we're the same. We are actually the same. And we now have some like video conference, and we have the World Wide Web, and we have all these things that show us this connection that was always already there. So now I go like, oh, look who I'm connected to on Facebook, or like, look how I can, so we can like almost see the connection more clearly. And like Stephanie actually said here in the comments, that it has her feel more separate. But in a way, that what it's showing us there, or what it's offering us, it's just showing us a connection that was always already there. Always there to be touched, always there to be tapped into. And for some of us, we may prefer to do it without the technology. And for some of us, we can use the technology, but can actually connect more at that energetic level. And for some of us, it helps to have the technology because it reminds us like, okay, I am connected. Like, okay, can I close my eyes and still know that person is there, that I'm connected? Can I turn away and then feel from the side the way we're connected? We tend to think like we're only connected if we're like front to front. And it's just not true. So animals also, of course, you can do this. I mean, many of you who have pets have had this experience that like, you'll just like think about your pet and they're like, what? Right? So they're often more tapped into this emotional, sensory, energetic connection. But you can feel them, right? Like have your back be sitting at your desk, right? And your dog is sort of behind you, but just like sense like, oh, so how many feet behind me are they? And not like, oh, what do I remember? Do I know? But like, I can actually tell. It's about 3.5 feet, and it's not even about checking and being like, was I right? Was I not right? One of the important things about practicing at this level is actually to trust what you feel. It's not about the other person. It's not like, oh, I can feel that they're sad and that's true. So it's never about the other person or the, outside yourself, but like, oh, I sense them there. Just trust like, yes, there's something true about that. And that helps develop that, or strengthen. It helps strengthen actually that capacity is standing in your own trust of it. So plants, animals, other humans you live with, humans that are around you. And again, that one is often less specific unless you happen to know your neighbors. But that feeling of like, oh, I can just feel like there's someone on the other side of this wall, like, or oh, like I can't do the general sense, right? But it's really important. And frankly, I mean, this is why I love bringing this forward actually, is like, it's really important right now. And we kind of, as a human species, we care about it right now. Like, yeah, like I want to be able to feel connected, even though I can't be in the same physical space or like touch people. And so it matters. And we're at like this kind of peak moment of it mattering. But this has always been true, and this will always be true. And so wouldn't it be awesome to develop this capacity now so that when quarantine's lifted or shelter in place is lifted, when we're with each other, we don't let go of it, and we only deepen our connections and our relationships so that when we're actually physically with people, we're really with them. We're not just like in conversation with them, or what we see, what we can, what we can know to be true with our scientific, rational selves, but also in this, again, this is what Clarissa Pinkola Estes calls the non-rational realm. It's neither rational nor irrational. It's the non-rational realm, the more than rational realm. And for me, it just deepens all of the connections. And there becomes this, and this is, none of this is to minimize, anyone, especially people. I want to really acknowledge this, for people for whom touch is maybe a primary love language. That's a whole other Facebook Live. So none of this is to minimize other ways in which we also have needs. We have needs to be face to face. We have needs to actually be touched, that there are these other or held or, but to add this to it, because I very much have the experience of feeling connected almost all the time in like a pretty vast network that is absolutely human, but also more than human in terms of other animals, in terms of plant life, and even beyond that, that kind of consciousness that is in all things. I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, but I do want to speak to just that it's a delightfully connected experience of life. And I really wish that for all of you, which is the main reason that I wanted to talk about this. And I really want, I want to empower all of you to feel nourished by how you choose to connect via technology and via screens during this time, when that is one of the big methods we have for these things. Like, it's such a blessing for me that I can connect with my Kundalini yoga teacher, like really be held in her space, not just connected in this web way, or really be in the space with my teacher, we're doing meditation in the morning, or really be, that there are these ways to still receive and be in this kind of connection. And let's use them in ways that actually nourish and support how we want our life to feel and how we want to experience life. And may that only continue to inform us as we're able to shift out of quarantine and shift out of shelter in place, and then integrate all the parts, integrate whatever was so beautiful about this, maybe slower, maybe simpler, maybe more alone, maybe being able to connect. Like my mother, for instance, this kind of blew me away. My mother just spontaneously started going through her old address book, which she had when I was a child. It's an actual book. It's like this big. It has a hardcover, and it has like little kind of poems or humorous sayings in it. And each letter, right, the segment as it goes A, B, C, D, all the way through Z, has like an animal or a human in the shape of that letter. And so I actually have a very evocative memories of this address book from when I was a child. My mother's, actually, I probably get my technological aversion from my mother. Like, she's analog to the nth degree. But she still has this address book, and she's like, well, I just decided to kind of go through and update it, And she basically said she's been discovering people that she's been out of touch with for a long time. She's just been calling them. And so I love what a colleague of mine named Nisha Moodley said, kind of way back when a lot of this really started the wave of it really began to hit in the United States. She said that this isn't for the best, or this isn't happening for the best. This is happening, and we will make the best of it. And I think that's an important distinction, because it's kind of cruel in a way to put positive intention behind something that is so destructive and causing so much suffering and pain for so many people. But we will make the best of it, and we are making the best of it. And one of the ways we can do that is to take this as an opportunity to actually create our lives the way we want to experience them. And then to find ways to integrate that as we shift back into, I hope, frankly, not quote unquote normal life. I hope that this is dramatic and systemic change. You know, I hope things change dramatically and they never go back to normal. And I say that from the place of actually coming into a much deeper awareness of the places that I benefit from quote unquote normal, and the ways in which I was like, oh, I like it that way. And even though I recognize that it does not necessarily benefit all beings. So, you know, may we all really come to terms with the way we benefit from normal and be willing to let them go in service of what could be a much more beautiful expression of life going forward. Thank you so much for being here with me. And I just wanted to run through and see, I know I missed some people saying hi, so good to see you. And wonderful. I'm glad that this served you, Wild, and also Laura, and all of you who are with me here live, and all of you who are watching the replay. And if you bring comments after the fact, I'll absolutely come back to them as well. And you know, let us begin a dialogue and an expansion in this way. I'm sending you so much love. Ciao.